Welcome, Sanjukta ma'am.
Uh, thanks for again. Thanks again for inviting me to this very pertinent, theme, and very pertinent this theme of this webinar. And it is really nice to be here. And I would share my thoughts on teaching and research methods.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to briefly introduce you for to our participants. So, presently, Dr. Sanjukta Bhaduri is a professor of urban planning at SPA School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. She is holding the post of Dean Research in Urban Planning Department at SPA, New Delhi. She has been the former head of Department of Urban Planning at SPA. She has done bachelor's in architecture from Jadavpur University 1983 and master's in city planning from IIT Kharagpur in 1985. She also has a PhD from SPA New Delhi, which was done back in 2003. In total, she has about 34 years of professional research and teaching experience in the field of urban planning and environmental planning. She has been involved in over 20 research, institutional, and consultancy assignments in the field of urban planning and environmental planning. She has supervised various doctoral research in country and abroad. Professor Bhaduri has been a member of various committees that are involved in policy formulation, planning, and guiding the development of urban settlements. She is also a resource faculty for several national level professional bodies. She also has two patents to her credit for innovative projects under Design Innovation Center, which she's also heading at School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. Her areas of special interest are focused on sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. That is related to master planning, local area planning, sustainable development of settlements, smart cities, participatory planning, social aspects related to planning, urban environmental management, disaster management, assessment of environmental impacts, energy and urban development, environmental quality of human settlements, etc. She is also running two online courses. The one is on city and metropolitan planning and urban, and second is urban disaster risk reduction and climate resilient development, which are available on Swayam platform. So all the faculty participants may refer to her talks on these two topics anytime if they wish to and refer to. So with this brief introduction, I would request Professor Sanjukta to start with her talk and address the participants. Over to you, Sanjukta ma'am.
Okay. Actually, sorry for referring to the faculty development program as webinar. So the faculty, I'm really sorry for that. This today, what I'm going to share with you, if you when you said Swayam platform, it will when you go to the Swayam platform, the city and metropolitan planning course is running now, so it is there. So I have not really detailed out because it is there on the Swayam platform, so one can go and just click Swayam platform and it will come. And the urban disaster risk, these are the two online courses, which is a very good medium of teaching students, of having an interactive, rather not a just it is basically, it is a very video oriented teaching, which, what we say is that when we what we remember only those what we see. So, it is, this is one of the principles based on which this medium is based. And one can also have hybrid blended learning, but this is basically, it's not a hybrid, it's a totally online platform. So these are the two courses which has been running for the last 3 years. And urban disaster risk will be running in the next semester. So now I'll share my screen, and I will come to the presentation. This is just a warming up of what I wanted to say, that when you're referring to the online platforms. So I'll just come to my presentation. I'll just share my presentation. So when we talk about outcome-based education, we are talking basically about what would be the, I'm focusing on the teaching and research methods. So when we talk of the global targets, what are the global targets? Is basically we all know that this was the Global Education Development Agenda, which has talked, the SDG 4, which has talked about agenda for sustainable of this 2030 agenda for sustainable development. It is basically seeking to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. The moment we say inclusive, it is education for all. It is all the disadvantaged people, who students who cannot really get enrolled or get access to any education. So it's basically it's inclusive and equitable quality education, and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. And I would relate it to online learning again, though that online learning, the SWAM platform, is basically, their objectives are also this, that is lifelong learning opportunities. There can be refresher, you can refresh your skills, and it is education for everybody. It is for I mean, there is no bar. It is for all age groups, it is for all everybody. So at for various income groups, because it's many a times the SWAM platform at least is free. So it is for education, it is very necessary that disadvantaged people, education is something which becomes accessible. So that is one point which I wanted to say. Then we come to that, as we know, this was the ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education. Target 4.4 has said that how the number of youth and adults who need to have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment. Ultimately, why we require skills, why we require that we require to learn, because we rather, it is not to keep with ourselves, it is to apply. It is to apply. So therefore, it is for employment, for jobs, for entrepreneurship. One can learn for having also, startups. So therefore, there are various type of skills which are available, which one can procure and one can learn. And 4.4.1 is talking about this proportion of youth and adults with information and communication technology skills by type of skill. And basically, many times after this post COVID, we have understood the the importance of ICT skills, and we have understood that people who really were not did not have ICT skills also adapted and were came on board, and were they procured knowledge through this medium. So now we go to the our national targets, which is the national education policy which has come up. So the national education policy 2020 envisions an India centric, rather a student centric, a student centric education system that contributes directly to transforming our nation's sustainability into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all. So it is again talking of inclusivity, that every person of all age groups should have education, should have access to education and access to high quality education. So our global targets, our global initiatives, or the national initiatives have sort of given us that framework, given us that platform on which one can work towards, or one can try to achieve these goals or these targets. So therefore we come to the what, why, and how of outcomes based education. The what of outcomes based education, basically outcome based learning. We learn, but we do not know what is to be done with that learning. So when we come to this outcome based, so at least linking up the learning with what would be what the student is taking with them. So we have to prepare the students to the when they go out for their employment purposes. At least they know that yes, it is applicable, they can, the tools, the skills, they can apply in their profession. So therefore outcome based learning, as it must have been discussed in these 5 days, in the earlier days also. So but just recapitulating, just a few slides, then I'll come to the research methods. So therefore, the curriculum, the teaching methods, and the pedagogy, what we call, we have to focus on enabling the student to apply. This is very, very important. Theoretically, a student may know, but a student may not know how would that person apply the knowledge. For example, local area planning. We may teach the student local area planning as what is local area planning. But if we do not appraise them about what are the challenges which a local area plan, if you have to do a local area plan, what the student would, the challenges which the student would face while working onto it, participatory. It is easier said than done. We say participatory processes, local area planning. But then in local area planning, bottoms up approach, it is very easy to say, but there are a lot of hurdles, lot of challenges. And how do we apply? How do we, within this constraint, within this situation, within this existing context, how do we apply? So all our teaching, whatever we try to do, it is not just providing that yes, this is the tool. When we talk of environmental impact assessment methodologies, if we talk of impact assessment methodologies, any methodology, social impacts, environmental impacts, economic, what sort of impact assessments, if we talk about, there are tools. Of course, there is the methods, checklist, matrices, or there are so many types of methods. But then when these type of methods, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, when to apply, how, on, in what context to apply, in which situation, in what projects one can apply these, which tool, whether you where will you require to apply a network, where you will require to simulate, where would you require to do a cost benefit analysis. So those sort of, those sort of understanding of the learning is important. And student centered teaching, of course, the student, it is for the students. We teachers are there for our students, so therefore the students, how to get the student learning into place, their smooth transition into their professional arena, that's what needs to be done. Now, what are the why we require to do? So for developing the intellectual skills, innovative capacity. Today, government of India and all over the world, people are talking of innovation. In fact, innovation is, there is a lot of thrust on innovation. There are ministry projects on innovation. So everybody, and because there are a lot of issues, a lot of problems which are typical to our, maybe to our country, maybe to our situation, maybe to low income groups, or maybe to low income groups. So can you give me a moment, please? Just a moment. Yes. So when we talk of this innovative capacities, skills, critical thinking, reasoning skills, how do we connect to the client? For example, there may be many issues are there of the city, the from the individual to the I would say to the community, to the city, to the sub-city level. So there are various levels at which from one individual person to a community to the entire city, that there are problems and issues. And those problems and issues today, if we have to address those problems and issues, no longer we we have to rather rethink on our traditional approaches. So therefore innovation, there may be uh, you know we require innovative capacities to come up with affordable solutions which can be accessed by low income groups also. I was referring to low income groups, by low income groups also. And um, uh, so that is one part of it, that why we require it, that we have to, outcome based education we require for this. Then critical thinking and reasoning skills, when we teach the students our critical thinking, what is our what's our, instead of just, for example, we every student reads, articles for assignments, and we read the uh, articles for assignment. So when we read these articles for assignment, it, instead of just going through them reading, do we ever uh, uh, teach them to do a critical analysis of the document, that what is the critical analysis of the document, then that critical thinking, then the questioning, the ability to question the theories will come on. So therefore we require this aspect of critical thinking, which is a very important component of that. Instead of taking in whatever is given to us, or whatever is rather given to the student, if the person has that capacity, if we can inculcate the capacity of critical thinking in the student, and talking of doing a or a questioning, or rather uh, arguing that theory or that aspect, then in that case it becomes, then that person or the student is ready for doing new research, or going into developing new theories. So, and the reasoning skills. Without reason, actually, when we say in planning, we say that planning is common sense, is all about common sense and logic. Now, if we do not have a justification, if we, whatever we are doing, if we cannot justify, then if there is no basis, if there is no logical framework, then planning is all about, it's about just putting in, it's into, then it becomes intuitive, then it becomes subjective. So therefore reasoning skills are important for the student, and the student, when the person goes out, if with all these skills, then the person is ready for what we call as for the profession, for contributing to this profession, to this, and then participatory approaches. As I said, we require these participatory approaches. There are a lot of issues. When I was talking about this local area planning, I was talking of participatory. In various fields today, we are talking of participation. We are talking of participatory approaches. But then, if the student does not have a skill, or does not have soft skills, does not have if we do not teach them soft skills, if we do not tell them that yes, this is how to, for example, there are, when we talk of participation, we know that there will be a lot of conflicts. There are five people would be thinking in five different ways. So how can a student be prepared to come up with a conflict resolution or approach, and how would the person be enabled with a negotiation, or rather a negotiating skill, that how the person can negotiate with them and come up with and arrive at a shared approach or a shared concept. So this sort of teaching is required for any is required today, because today the situation, our cities, the way cities are growing, the way again what is happening to our built environment, it is these, all these aspects are required for the students. The students should be prepared for all this. So therefore I go to the next point, which is how. So how do we go about it? So we know that what is to be done and why it's to be done, but then how? So to achieve outcome based learning, students engagement, how can the student get engaged in the learning process? How does it become interactive? Many a times the teacher is speaking, the student is silent. We do not know, whatever we speak, whatever we are telling the student, whatever we are imparting this education, whether the student is taking it in, whether the student has absorbed, what is the absorption capacity, we do not know. Whether the student is physically present in the offline classes, and the student, many a times our feedback from our students shows that the student says long, there are students, students say that we after a long time I met the student, and the student said that this ma'am, we were there in your class, but we are physically present, we have not really were not listening to what you were saying. Today we understand that we have missed out. So the point is that, point which I'm trying to make is that, can that means the student is not, either it's not get is not interested, or is not getting involved, or is not rather the person is not liking that subject or liking that whatever is being taught. So therefore the pedagogical maybe we have to rethink on our ways of teaching, on the curriculum also, how we can relate our curriculum to our, and what sort of, like I said, that what is seen, we remember only what we see. So if it can be visual, if it can be, the visual teaching visually. I mean, many a times I was teaching to the undergraduate students last semester only on inclusive planning, inclusive cities, and there were a lot of things which I felt was that, and which I tried to do after one or two classes, was taking having videos, putting in videos, putting in related, for that particular aspect. When I was teaching participatory, then I was trying to see, okay, people have talked, there were TED talks on participation, there were various videos, there were various good practices, videos on that. So therefore it, breaking the class, or having a break in the class, and having through these methods one can use. And the feedback from the students was very encouraging, they all liked. So therefore, I felt that this sort of way of, the teaching, and then the teacher imparting education, as well as in terms of teaching, and then powerpoints, and then some videos, and some images. So it helps a lot in. And then the assessment, how do we assess? What is assess? Is a person coming into the class and sitting and writing exams, and that's the assessment which we want to do, or we want to test their skills, we want to test their reasoning skills, we want to test their skills of justification, rational. There are various ways of testing a student. And various in countries abroad, they have their own mechanisms of testing the students. So whether that student has, in this part, has how much has that person understood or gained. So assessment, I think, should be based on those assessing those skills which we want the students to develop, or which we want to impart in the students. So the teaching methods, as we all know, but still I want to recapitulate once, that there are instructional strategies, there are interactive teaching infrastructure. You can have, there are a lot of ways we can have interactive teaching infrastructure. We can have academic concepts can be explained in a very interesting way. The history of settlements can be explained in a very interesting way. When we talk of architecture education, history is many people find history boring, but then history can also be taught in a very interesting way. In fact, when we I want to share with you one experience. When as SWAYAM instructors, when we UGC told us that even law can be explained in a very interesting way. So the SWAYAM instructor who was giving his course on law, he was also encouraged to think out innovative, out of the box concepts, out of the box teaching methods for law. So therefore, how can we make it visual? So these sort of things, like one can be innovative. The faculty can be this. If we want the students to do what we want them to do, that means we want them to learn, then the faculty has to be innovative. If we want the students to be innovative, then the faculty has to be innovative, because students look up to the faculty for what they learn. If so therefore, if you see today, the AICT has come up with a startup policy for not only students but also faculty. So therefore, faculty and students, this is the combination, this is the team. Rather, I would say a faculty and a student is a team, and both together uh, make what we and should make, and what we want to achieve for the country or for the cities. And performance evaluation techniques I was referring to, that how do we, is it just, or is it a multiple choice? What do you want to, how do you want to assess the students? IELTS and all these, how they have a different way of assessing. So one can through quizzes, through assignments, through different methods, one can go in for performance evaluation. So it is not just a subjective assignment and one descriptive or something like that. I mean, the traditional. Now actually whatever we have been using over the past many years, though I'm not saying that everything needs to change, there are certain things which uh, we should retain, and but we have to move with the times. New things which are coming up, new ways of looking at things, new ways of performing certain things, new ways of teaching, all that we have to embrace. So my point is not discarding everything. We have to take whatever is was the way we were imparting, but add on, embrace new ways. So now we come to the online learning. We were talking of online learning. So basically it is the technological sense. Through online learning, a student enhances its technological skills. Then student engagement is possible through audiovisual medium. So this is a very good medium through which the student engagement is possible. Then transition from in-person to online is bound by forces larger than an architecture curriculum. So there are people, there are students who know that yes, this is this sort of a course, and today students, they themselves find out what sort of course is there in Coursera, what sort of course is there in other platforms, NPTEL, and they try to find out, and then they sort of work out, okay, this is what we require. So they are moving to courses which are being provided by somebody else. But why can't our institutions, if in our institutions we sort of provide, if it's in house, if this sort of rather ways of teaching is there, then the student will be very enthused, and they would try to learn from the institute, whatever institute is providing them with. Then online group working tools like Dropboxes, then Jamboard is such a good way of design. Many a times this COVID has taught us that when you do not have when you want to interact with the students, you want to give them crits on the maps or crits on their designs. So then on their plans, then we can use Jamboard. So therefore there are a lot of ways which are coming up, of interacting, these are what I was telling, interactive technological interactive infrastructure, teaching infrastructure. So therefore this sort of mechanisms we can take up, and one can on these online working tools, group working tools, we can adopt. So Swayam is one such program. There are Arpit also. You all faculty members must be knowing Arpit. Swayam is a program initiated by Government of India, and it is basically the principles are access, equity, and quality. So educational policy is access. So everybody should be accessible. The people should be access. The education or whatever one is providing, it should be accessible to everybody. Equity should be then quality education. So these are the three principles of the policy, which is, and the objective is to have the best teaching and learning. This is across the board for all online platforms, not only Swayam. I've given Swayam here as one of the cases to demonstrate, to put it across. So Swayam basically seeks to bridge the digital divide, which is and then how get, because today in the future also, we in our profession also, the student needs to have this skill, the skill which will overcome it from this rather the skill for uh, accessing the net, going online. So that skill every person can acquire, and that is uh, one of the targets. So now, why research? Now let us see that whether we need to, or uh, where does research come in? Why in all this? I was till now talking about teaching methods. I was talking about how we can teach, and why we should, and how in outcome based education it is related. But then research is a part of is a very important part of our education system. If we do not research, if we do not publish, our research findings, and if we do not research, we would be standing at the same point, at the same uh, point. We will not be moving forth. Research helps us to venture into territories, new territories, into areas which new theories, new practices, new ways of uh, design, new rather I would say regulations, recommendations, new areas where which we would not have done if we would not have researched. So we research that, okay, what is today, this is a problem. So all our innovations, whatever inventions have come in the past, whether from all our inventors, the basic concept or the basic point is that uh, they've come out of what was there, and there was a need for research. We say necessity is the mother of invention. So without a necessity, we would not have invented. And without, if there's the research also, there is a need for research. And therefore, through this need for research, we come out with new things, and we come out with inventions, interventions, new interventions. So therefore, as Zaha Hadid puts it, the current state of architecture and design requires extensive collaboration and an investigating attitude. We have to investigate. If we just look at it superficially and we do not probe, investigation, how does a how prima facie, like we police say, prima facie the case is closed, but without, if we do not investigate, we may not find out that maybe in many cases what is happening behind the scenes, what is really happening, or what we require. So therefore, investigative attitude is required to go and to probe into certain things, to find out, can we really research, can we really search it again, and we continue to develop new research and technologies. So therefore, research, it's a, as it's put forth, it is a systematic study and investigation in some field of knowledge undertaken to establish facts or principles. Either we establish facts, we develop new facts, or we prove something, we disprove something. So in the field of knowledge, and the field, what we call is that actually this field is actually a very dynamic field. It is not a static field. Knowledge is never static. Knowledge is always growing. It's dynamic. So therefore, we have to, in this field, if we have to, this field of knowledge, if we are in the field of knowledge, we have to research. We have to go into various aspects and see what is happening, and where one can contribute. So it's basically a search for knowledge and systematic effort for acquiring new knowledge. There are tasks, there are steps to acquire this new knowledge, and there is development of an organized body of scientific. Ultimately, what comes out when we publish these findings, when we publish the research finding, a new the body to the scientific knowledge gets enriched. New things come in. It adds on to the content of scientific knowledge. So basically, um, undertaking a research study is to find out answers to a question through systematic. I'm repeating. In fact, this word has come in 2 3 slides. Systematic. That means it is methodical. Systematic means it is methodical. That means there are methods of doing it. You cannot do it uh, intuitively. One cannot do it, haphazardly. So therefore, it is systematic, and it is being undertaken within a framework of a set of philosophies, uses procedures, methods, and techniques that have been tested for their validity and reliability, and has to be unbiased and objective. So therefore, research has to has to um, has to meet the rather has to achieve this. Now, architectural research, you must have seen this. All of you must have seen this. There are theories, there are problems, and there's the methods. So there's something called literature. I'm coming to the methods, but this is a overall. I wanted to put it once that there are journals, there are books, there is online resources, there are archives from where we draw upon, we probe, we investigate that what sort of theories, what sort of principles we draw up, we learn from there. Then there's a framework which with the concepts, models, ideas, a framework is generated. That is the a theoretical framework. From this literature review, we come up with a theoretical framework, and then we identify before coming up to a theoretical framework. We have there are various issues, personal issues, social, strategic, theoretical. So, and based on this, we try to work out our statement, our hypothesis, the questions, research questions. We try to work out that what is it that we are going to research on. Is it related to social issues? It is related to individual issues? Is it strategic? Is it theoretical? And then we work out. And we also have a context. Without a context, it is difficult to do that. So context is maybe it's the ontological or political context or social, cultural. Many a time we think the context is, for architects or planners, we think it is the city, it is the sub city, it is the local area, it is the built as a built environment of an area. So the context is that, and then with the working framework, with whatever framework we make, we use these tools which are this interviews, questionnaires, surveys, observations, experiments, for getting for collecting the data, which is um, we require the data to prove or disprove the hypothesis. And the sample is character, the what is the who, what would be the sample, how big would be the sample, from where would be the sample, how do we do the sampling. So there are a lot of aspects to sampling. We have random sampling, we have stratified sampling. There are various sampling. We have a certain percentage of the universe, because the sample is actually considered as the universe when we uh, research. And then finally we come to the conclusions, which and the recommendation, the solutions, the strategies, and the recommendations. But I'll come this is not in steps, but I'll just come to you in that methodological, or in the methodology. I'll in my forthcoming slides I'll come to that. This is an overall understanding of what we require. We require the literature, we require the need. Origin is actually the need of that. We require the statement, we require the context, we require data, we require tools, we require conclusions. So all this we require. So therefore this is what uh, research entails. So, and these are the various types of research. These are the various types of research. This research is talking of, from there is one type of classification of research which says that application. If it's applied research, there are various research, which happens in medical fields or any other fields, which is applied research. If you are developing a vaccine, it has to go into the market, it has to be, people have to use it. So there are various application oriented research, then there are descriptive research, there are exploratory research, then there are explanatory research, there's correlational research, there's inquiry mode. So this is inquiry mode, that is quantitative qualitative research. So this is one way of looking at the research. The another way of looking at the research is that it can be interpretive or historical. This is another way of looking at research. The classifying research, the types of research. Historical, we can interpret, we can go through in fact, I was, when I was teaching this inclusive planning, I was trying to see that in traditional, in the past also, in our cities of the past, uh, uh, the planning of the cities itself was was promoted or propagated exclusion. There were the whites, there were the in colonial age, there were these whites, there were these blacks, there were different, there was segregation, total segregation. So there was exclusion. Some areas were not available for the other people to go into. Then there are, if you look at the our old, prior to that, all our civilizations, also those areas were, there was for the priests there was one, for the businessmen there was another area. So these sort of things one can interpret. That can also be a research, that one is looking through over a period of time and trying to see historically what was it. So we were moving through that. We explained, in fact, that's what we were I was one part of the of my delivery for my subject. Then qualitative research, so that is another one. Then correlational research, I'm coming to that in detail, what is that philosophy and approach. Experimental, simulation, logical argumentation. You have to excuse me because we are on the main road SPA, and it is lots of disturbance because this road is going to Trans Jamuna. So this road is really uh,
It's okay, ma'am. It's okay.
uh,
I think we
logical
can hear you well.
okay, logical argumentation and case studies approach. Now I'll explain what are these approaches, how these are. So if you look at these research types of research, you say philosophy. What is this philosophy? What does it talk about? It is basically narrating a trajectory, a growth path, a path. You're trying to narrate something. So that is interpretive or historical. And what is this approach? You have to take empirical evidence from the past based on archival material, documents. One can see now, for example, one can look at, oh, what is the, let us see how maybe what happened to the rivers which have gone underground. What was it ever, maybe it was overground some at places, then suddenly it went underground. What happened? What are those? So one can go and one can find out. There can be empirical evidence, or to a resource, or any, for example, Dwarka. What happened to the Dwarka city? uh, in mythology, the Dwarka city, there were now ruins which is underground. So there may be archival material, documents. So history, if you really look at the history, you'll find there are various cases on which what has happened to our to old, for example, Hampi and all those areas. How the site investigations one can look, then interviews of eyewitnesses, comparison with similar situations, identification of key actions or events. What led to that change? Maybe that change has taken place. So what led to that change? So those sort of, that is also one type of a research, which is an interpretive historical research. So you are moving through history, try to find out from history what is the problem and how things happen. But basically how things happen, and what made it happen. So this sort of research. Then qualitative, it is subjective. Basically it is an investigative exploratory research, interpretation of complex situations. Suppose there is a complex socio-cultural situation. For example, there are conflicts in any city. So if you want to research on the conflicts, urban conflicts, that whether what sort of conflicts exist. So this sort of one can interpret, one can research on that. Then you have to ask, you have to have, questionnaires, you have to interview people, you have to the, have a see how many times these sort of conflicts have happened, where they have happened, who are the participants, or who are the who got affected. So those sort of things can be what we call as part of qualitative research. One is coming up with this complex situations. One is trying to, in our country we have these cities are very layered, and there are a lot of complexities in our country. In the cities, in our built form, in our built environment, high density situations. So those sort of situations, what happens? Maybe density, what is the impact, or what is density, how does density affect people? One can try to look at, investigate. Then correlational, this is relation between variables. So descriptive, non-experimental, this is through observation, secondary data, large scale data analysis. One can compare, one can compare cities or case study areas. There may be more than few cities one can take up, and one can take up some aspects, and one can compare and do a large scale data analysis and observe that there is a certain pattern, there's a certain relation between variables. So one can, so that sort of research can also be done. Then the next is that there is, which we basically do, which in most of our institutes we try to do, experimental, quantitative research methods, because this, based on these quantitative research methods, recommendations, we can make. And because it's on quantitative research methods, so it is not like, the difference between a mandate and a guideline. So the earlier one, the number three, which was a qualitative one, would have given us some insight or guideline, but the quantitative research methods pinpoints and says that, see, this is happening, this is very objective. So therefore it is based on, it's basically objective, and it's a relation, and it's basically an understanding of the cause and effect relationship between an independent variable and dependent variable. Y is equal to mx plus c when we say. So y is the dependent variable and x is the independent variable. So how is y affected by x? So that, those sort of things we try to work out. And so observation, secondary data we have to take in. So and simulation is also in many institutes today. There's a lot of, simulations done, modeling, system dynamics. So one is trying to simulate, one is trying to model a phenomena. Yes, there is a phenomena. Now if I want to know that what will be my carrying capacity in the next 25 years, so I have to model the existing today's situation. If I want to see in today's situation, this is the situation. Now I want to see that so this is the phenomenon today. I want to uh, sort of forecast it. I want to model it, and I want to say that, yes, this is how the system will behave, or this is dynamics of the system, that this is how it will go ahead in this next 25 years. So those sort of what we call as the simulation modeling. And this is analogs, operational and mathematical. Through that one can work out, that one can uh, forecast or estimate the trends based on the phenomena which is happening. Then suppose if we have a carrying capacity of we want to know the water-based carrying capacity. Now we all know that water is a critical resource today, and in future, we are all threatened, and we keep on hearing that water, we will not have water. We will the it will be a and all over the world, people are researching on water, how to uh, what is to be done with this resource. So now there can be a water-based, suppose water-based carrying capacity is, we want to simulate, and we want to say, if we the way we today we are using water, the way we are the so in that context, it may go on for maybe next 5 years or 10 years. But if we have interventions, then what would be our, suppose rainwater harvesting, recycling, there are so many other ways of water conservation, of managing the resource. So if we go ahead with those, then maybe it can sustain for a longer period of time. So this sort of modeling also one can work out, one can research into that. So these are the ways simulation. And many institutes, what is going on is basically quantitative, historical also, but quantitative research methods are where it's, and simulation is used. These, it's going on. Then there is a logical argumentation, which is deductive or inductive. Now deductive is what? It is a, there's a theory, you are generating, you are understanding a phenomenon from that, and then developing a hypothesis. Then you are trying that hypothesis, in order to prove or disprove that hypothesis, you are going in for observation. You means data collection. Basically you require data and to get out certain patterns. So this is a deductive. From theory you're starting, and you're coming down to some patterns, which is you're recommending that, yes, based on my this thing, I'm finding some patterns. Or it can be the other way around, which is inductive. That means observation, you are observing something, a pattern, then from that you are developing a hypothesis, and from there you are forming, you are coming up with a new theory, or a theory, or a phenomena. So it can be the other way around. In both ways it can work. And case study research is comparative analysis of case studies, and basically it is an empirical research activity. There can be, there can, for example, I want to compare that slums of various 5, 6 maybe slums across an area. If I take up 7 slums, I want to compare and I want to see that what is happening into that. It's an empirical research activity. You have to go, you have to survey the slums, you have to ask the people, you have to see what sort of various aspects of slum housing. If you want to look at slum housing, then what sort of slum housing is it? The same? Is it there are differences? Is it in because it is located in North Delhi, it is something different? If it is in South Delhi, it is something different. If it is in East Delhi, it is something different. Is it like that, or is it that there are some commonalities there, some typicality is also there, but some commonality is also there? So these sort of things one has to case study based analysis. Anyway, case study, we can have a combination also. One can package it out. When you talk of a quantitative research methods, case study approaches also can be used as a package. So therefore one can look into that. It is not that these have to be done separately. They can be a combination, they can be put together as a package. One can work out case study. Anyway, in every study, the context or the cases, one has to look at that what sort of case study one is trying to have. Now the research methods, when we say what are the research, let us come to the, I'd given you that some keywords in that, architecture research, but now I'm saying one is to first identify a research area or a theme. Now research area or theme always has to be identified based on the gap in the knowledge. It is not that 10 people have done something and we are just going to look at it and find out something. No, we have to find out that where is the gap and where is my contribution to that knowledge comes in. So therefore or anybody's contribution into the knowledge comes in. So the gap in the knowledge is important. And then for the need is also important. Is there a need of that theme? Many themes become defunct. We don't require. There are, so many times, what we required 10 years back, today maybe we do not require. There are so many aspects we do not require because things have changed. So situations have changed, contexts have changed. So whether that area of study, is there a need of that area of study, or that area, maybe you do not require that area. For example, I would give you an example. When we talk of shared cities, sharing spaces, shared spaces. So in such cases, like in the COVID times, we could not have thought of thinking of shared spaces. But then one has to see that, okay, then what would be the face of that shared space? How would we go about that? So need of a certain theme one really has to look at. And what is the context on which one is trying to do the study? So the context, that the area, the location, the city, what is the context? The housing complex, if you wants to work out, the precinct, if one goes in for heritage. So what is the context? So justification of that context. Why is it that we have to do that? We have to have that context in that, and one is to justify that this context is, through these contexts one can prove, or one can add on to the, or one can research. Then the research questions, which are very very important. How do we frame our research questions in order to reach our target? We know that there is a hypothesis. We are trying to correlate between two aspects, cause and an effect relationship between an independent variable and a dependent variable. So there can be various, that can be higher the density, the more the risk. It can be higher the community participation, uh, the higher the conservation of a resource. So there can be various ways of working out hypothesis. So when we work out this hypothesis, what would be the research cost questions which would be coherent with this hypothesis? So how do we prove? Because hypothesis cannot be, it's like padav. It is like kaun banega crorepati. It is like steps. It is, you have to achieve something through steps. So those steps, how do you go about it? So research questions are nothing but you are going to answer each question one after the another, and then would arrive at your hypothesis. So therefore research questions are important, and one has to frame the research questions which would lead to hypothesis proving or disproving. And objectives are basically the steps that you will do in order to achieve, in order to go about this. For example, you have to do a data collection, you have to do analysis, you have to do, I'll come to the methodology. These objective, I'll show you the methodology. Now, there are certain things called variables and indicators. When we work out the hypothesis and research questions, when we do, so there are, we have to come out with variables and indicators that we will, this comes of this part. In fact, this slide should have gone after literature review. Variables and indicators are worked out from the literature review, or what from our background study we do. We work out, we make a, what would be the variables which are the parameters of study, and indicators are measurable variables. So therefore, variables and indicators, if we do not have indicators, we will not decode our study. In order to decode our work, we need to have these detailed indicators, and these detailed indicators are some things like, for example, it's very measurable. One is trying to find out, for example, if I said high density, so one is to have to decode what is high density. Then is it a built up area density, is it population density? So those are the indicators which need to be worked out. So therefore, indicators are important, and one has to work out these indicators, which are based on the literature review, the lessons learned from the literature review. Various people have said some things, many people have worked on something, and they have also given indicators. We are not reinventing the wheel, but we are learning from the past experiences, and then we are taking forth the thought in a new direction. So that is what research is all about. And then research design, what data to be collected and how to collect. So you can see, this is a methodology. This is from one of our doctoral scholars. This methodology is the need of the study, then research hypothesis and objectives, research questions. This is then identification of indicators and variables, and then and this literature review. See, as you can see here, literature review. From this literature review, lessons learned and research questions, you can develop this identification of indicators and variables. There is selection of your context, and you can, what is the analytical framework for data collection. There are research methods and design, approach and data collection methods, field trips, then qualitative information, quantitative information. Now what can we, I'll come to, I'm not going to the details of this. Then just the structure, the tasks I wanted to show you. Tools which are used for data analysis, data interpretation, testing hypothesis, conclusion, suggestion, rather findings, I would say, then suggestions, recommendations, and aspects for further research, where this research is going to take, other people also should, can take this research into areas where one can take it in some other area of research. So aspects for further research one has to take. So now we go ahead to the data collection for the context, which is literature review. As I said, it's very important that what who all have worked in this field. There are maybe articles, there may be journals, there may be books, there may be online sources, various things. Then the measurements, if it is, one is trying to see that, suppose there is a shrinking of something, some areas have shrunk, or there is some degradation of an area, or something of some, so one can go into measurements also. One needs to, it depends upon the scope of the work. So it may be very micro scale, one needs to measure and see what is happening to maybe a monument. So therefore, measurements one can go into, documents and records one can see, empirical studies one can look, maps we require, because without for example, land use, land cover maps, one can see that how things have changed. One can look into heat island maps and see, okay, temperature of a city, how they have changed. So let us go into these maps and check that what has happened to this, wherever we have cut down trees, wherever we have deforested, maybe the temperature has gone up. So there are lot of things, maps can, one can interpret those maps. And then aerial photographs, then online sources, then observation, visual survey, focus group discussion. Now there may be maybe communities, you don't want to, the community, for example, the infrastructure is the same for that community, the water lines are also there, water is coming for 2 hours day or something. So there are certain things which are common for that community. So those, for that, focus group discussions are enough. One can go down to the RWA, find out what is happening to that area. So focus groups, it may not be a one-to-one survey. So it depends upon the situation where we require to have a focus group discussion or a one-to-one survey. Then the primary survey or the questionnaire. One is, if one wants to know whether the community will participate in something, then one has to, or which age group will participate. Suppose there is a resource which needs to be protected, so uh, and the communities are there, or if then one needs to ask them that which is would the youth be interested in protecting, or the elderly would be interested in protecting, would the women be interested in protecting. So there may be, stakeholder wise, one can ask questions, or can do primary survey. One can today, after COVID, post COVID, online surveys have become very useful. They have filled in the gap where one cannot go in for primary surveys on through online surveys, while also some information can be procured. So data analysis, one is statistical and non-statistical. So we have, one is examination, categorization, tabulation of evidence. One is just tabulating, okay, this much percent, or of maybe the density variations is this much. So it's just tabulating and trying to find out the data, okay, this is the variation. Or the wetlands have shrunk. So that's a tabulation of. Then one can do a cross case analysis across the case study areas. One can do correlation, regression. These are all statistical methods. Hypothesis testing tools. Model, if one models, when we talk of system dynamics and the modeling simulation, then the model or the framework needs to be validated also. So there are statistical techniques to validate the or tools to validate the framework, models or frameworks. So therefore there are ways, the tools are there. You have to know, uh, we have to know the usage, and we have to know the context. So if we have to know this tool is can do this thing, it can do this much, or this is the scope of the tool and scope of work of the tool, and if we know the context, then we can uh, apply the tool. So these sort of things are important. This is what I was talking earlier also, that a student, we have to tell the student, yes, this is the tool, and this tool can be applied in this way, and these are the limitations of the tool, these are the advantages of the tool, and in which context this tool can be applied. So this sort of knowledge, if the student has, then, because we cannot preempt situations in his or her profession, we cannot preempt situations that where can he use it? But if he has a knowledge, he or she has the knowledge of the tools and knows that yes, this tool cannot be used in this situation, or this technique cannot be used in this situation, and because of these limitations, then, and this because the context is like this, the complexity is like this, then it is a knowledge which it is enough for the student, for his profession, his or her profession. So the findings pertaining to each research question, proving or disproving of hypothesis. So one is, when you pertain to each research question, and one has to look at how one goes on answering these research questions, and which is leading into the proving, whether you whether you prove your hypothesis, or whether you say no, there is absolutely no relation with y and x. When I said y is equal to mx plus c, there can be a relation. There may not be a relation. You are disproving it. So one can go about it. So this sort of thing will come out from finding, and then, for example, one is try to look at, for example, design aspects. Design aspects. One is trying to see that, okay, one of my students have been working on collage, collage theory and all. So collage is as a design problem, as a design research. So collage at the street level, one street, whether that area there are is area different characteristics are there. So whether is it a collage, is it a functioning as a whole, or is it functioning as three different parts? If three typology, three characteristics are there, the stretch can be divided into three parts, and that it is forming I would say not a total whole, but a uh, uh, but its characteristics is distinct three different parts. It has its three different parts, or is it functioning as one stream? So this sort of also one can look at. So therefore, there are different typologies of research which can happen, and which can one can find out, and one can use. There are various ways of working on it. And then report writing, which is very very important. One has to go into the developing the outline, chapterization, referencing is very important, bibliography, plagiarism check, this one, any report. And of course because this is what we call as publication. If like in US they say either you publish or you perish. So if you do not publish whatever is done, if your work is not published or patented, many innovations are, if they are not patented, then there is bound to be you know plagiarism, there's bound to be people some so therefore one needs to publish the research, and one needs to publication shows that yes, this is a new idea, a new knowledge base, it has contributed to the new knowledge base. So therefore publishing is important, reports are important. And the design guidelines or the recommendations can be in the form of findings, contextual applicability in the form of either can be guidelines, or it can one of the research areas was, which I know of, is that the person was trying to do a research on this DCRs, development controls, based on climate. That if the sunlight entry is not there in the, which happens in various unauthorized colonies in our cities, that there's sunlight entry into the buildings because they are so close. So they don't really they violate the DCRs. So in such cases one was trying to find out that whether in how would, if sunlight does not come and go into the um, uh, into the apartment, then what sort of implications, or what were the problems which happen in terms of human health. We generally speak on that, but there was, that person was tried to measure the disease load based on this human. So therefore these are various it was not of course a doctoral level thesis, but this is a research area which I was trying to say, that this sort of work is there, one can research in such areas also. So new designs can come up, new ways of, new codes can come up. Previously we did not have form based codes, but after earlier we did not have form based codes, but now everybody's talking of form based codes. So, and therefore codes can, there can be new areas which can, new guidelines. So these sort of things can be the findings, and can be the and should have a contextual applicability. Now any research is talking, says it is done for any area, or for any case study areas, but it is understood that uh, this research, or the research has would have an universal applicability. So therefore it is not only related to uh, the city on which the person is working, but it should have a wider applicability. So that is also the case, that it may be in such a context, maybe if the similar contexts, then it would work. So in context number one, what that person, what a researcher is studying, in context, other contexts, if the similar contexts are there, then it may work. This theory, this phenomena, this framework, whatever has been done for the research will work in such cases. So therefore, this is the different recommendations one can come in. And I think I stop at this, because I don't have a thank you slide. I will say thank you. I did not deliberately put the thank you slide. So thank you. And I think this would be of benefit, or um, thank you everybody for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Sanjukta ma'am. It is always a pleasure listening to you. The emphasis you have put on research is much needed, and you have actually elaborated on an untouched topic of this FDP, that is research. It is really helpful for many of us struggling with writing papers or PhDs or teaching research-based subjects. So I think this was one of the most useful session for the faculty. We have an overwhelming response by the participants. They want to refer to your presentation in future. So, so I would like to inform the participants that we are also live on Facebook, and this video is available there. So you can refer to the same video later on. And I think it was very, very helpful. For me also, it was really helpful, and I would also like to look at for the later reference. So, ma'am, I would like to take couple of questions. We
Yes.
don't have many questions here, maybe because it was so well explained. So, first question is by architect Jyotsna Gaur. She's first of all, she's appreciating. She's saying, "Ma'am, it is a wonderful reflection of your experiences. The first online SWAYAM course on city and metropolitan planning in 2019 was a very good refresher for me, and I agree that post-COVID, there is a bigger need for such online platforms for both students and teachers. Congratulations to you for being a visionary. Should there be a proper framework in our country for evaluating architectural research, as most research papers lack the depth that other field papers do, as they include laboratory works, are crude facts and crude facts. So, should we streamline the way we as architects conduct research and have methods for evaluating research?
Okay, should I answer one by one? Na? I'll
Yes.
answer this. Okay, I definitely we should have we should have parity in whatever in research. Somewhere research, some research. In fact, I've been a reviewer in many. When it comes for peer review, I've seen that in some areas. Researchers are very meticulous, very good. Methodologies are followed. In some areas, some parts, things are not that in that. I would say. That good, but then what I mean to say is that one really needs to have some framework. I totally agree that one needs to have a parity, needs to have, if one has to do research, then these steps have to be followed, these needs, because sometimes you cannot jump steps, and many a time we see that we do either some step we jump or some step we do not do with that that enthusiasm as the other steps maybe, or the way we should have done. So therefore a framework or an understanding or rather for evaluation of these research. In fact, every journal, every for various institutes have their own journals, and people send their research papers there. Somewhere you will find that. That's why I'm saying that there is a huge you know uh, difference between the level of the research which has been conducted and the way which has been presented and the how. So there's a need of that. Definitely there's a need. I agree to that.
And then another question is,
Thank you, Architect Josna, for pointing this out. It is definitely a need to
Thank
do.
you, ma'am. I really appreciate your course as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
so ma'am, the next question is actually on the similar lines. This is by Nirmala Bishnoi. The participant is asking, um, how to identify the gap in research, whether it is area specific or gap should be based on a on global practices.
No, this is actually this is a very rather many when we tell our students that to please identify the gap in research, we have to always I mean, have to tell them that, see, when you are looking through literature, if you have identified any theme, if suppose you have identified any aspect and you want to work in that aspect, you want to specialize in that aspect, so you want to become an expert later in that aspect, so that theme has to be, you have to read on that theme. The more you read on that theme through books, journals, whatever data, you go through that and you find out that what people have researched on. And if on that theme people have not researched and you feel that no, this part is it has not been researched, And this is required for the research. That is the gap where your contribution will be there. If somebody has already done something, then there is no point in treading that same path. We say all big people, we say, now there is a saying, all big people have gone on that path, we should also tread on that path. Yes, big people have done research, let us do in overall, we let us in principle, let us follow. But big people or the good people or innovative people, whatever they have, the area of their research, you have to find out where they have not researched, what is that loophole, what is that is the gap. And that you can only find through literature search, through reading. The more you read, the more you on that theme, all over the world people are working on different aspects. So you will find a plethora of work. So you have to do a critical review. It is not just reading and an annotated bibliography. It is not like that. One has to do a critical review of those articles, of those books, and find out, okay, this theory has been contested, but then some person has not worked anything on that after that, post this time. So that is the gap. That is how one works out the gap in the professional any professional knowledge base today, in today's professional knowledge base.
Rightly said, ma'am. Now we are having many
Yes,
more questions.
I think she
She's
has
got her answer.
got
Yes.
her answer. I
Yes.
hope so. Thank you.
So we have many more questions coming up. So next question is by Anand Singh. He's asking, ma'am, can you please suggest how participatory approach, which is often used in master's level courses like urban planning and design, can be integrated at bachelor's level architecture course?
We can, because today we are all talking about a stakeholders approach. Now, stakeholder sometimes, what is a participatory approach? Participatory approach is you are involving the stakeholders in decision making. So when you talk of participatory approach in any, whatever you do in architecture, you are developing maybe for example, you are developing a township. Now you're designing a town. Who are the stakeholders in that township? People who are going to stay, people who are going to provide the services, people who are going to work in the schools or hospitals who are there. So which would be there. So there are the first point is that to identify the stakeholders in for your project, for your design, for your work. Who would be the stakeholders? And then those stakeholders, would they only be their rather their comments or their opinions? Would you take, there are various ways of taking their opinions. Would you take their opinion only in only in designing? Suppose you design and say that no, whatever you want, give us your opinion, feedback. Or would you try to take their opinion or use them, or another I would not say use, I would say engage them in monitoring, in implementing. So there are various ways, but there are so many projects which do not take the stakeholders into considerations, and they don't move, they don't complete, they don't see the light of the day. Many a times it happens, many situations. I'm not saying all, but many situations. So at every level, stakeholder consultations, stakeholder inputs, what stakeholders can do. Either they have any maybe some information base they can generate, they can give, which we do not do, which we do not have maybe. So some critical information of the site they can give us. So stakeholders inputs can come in at various levels, at various points. And for architects also, this is very, very important today. Therefore, participatory approach, when we talk of, we have to, in essence, we have to understand the participatory approach, but we have to, depending upon the stakeholders and what their scope of work, what they can do. Either they can provide information, either they can provide feedback on your project, either on your designs, either they can give their opinions on certain things, requirements, for their needs, requirements. How would you get their needs, requirements? Who is giving you that brief, design brief? It may not be the stakeholders. It may be only one person who is giving you a design brief. So if you can take the people into consideration, then maybe you can get a better insight into your, or for that matter, as I said, implementation or monitoring something. Suppose there's a green area in your in your in your uh, in the community, and you want to do so. The green area, who will protect it? Maybe the community. You can bring the stakeholders and say that, see, there are this is a housing complex, but there is nobody. After a few years, you will find that what is happening to the green area, it will become a parking space. The park will become a parking space. But then if the communities can come in, stakeholders can come in, then they can be engaged. If they can be engaged, then they can it will be very good for their themselves.
I think this question has come from the issue that we, as faculties, are creating for ourselves, that we are giving a hypothetical brief, and that hypothetical brief doesn't, on our end also, it doesn't consider the stakeholders in the first place. So students are also designing for a imaginary audience, and there is no connect between the
Yes, that's why I'm saying you have
reality and
to.
the brief.
Yes, yeah, and you have to engage them. But as I said, it is easier said than done. 5 people, you'll find 5 different opinions. So
Right.
how do you? Then what are the soft skills? How do you how do you say, okay, I can provide you this, but you can forego some of your demands. I can provide there's another set of people this, but you have to forego. So negotiating things. I think today, and every architect should have these soft skills, or the skill of negotiation with them, because otherwise we will not be able to really not be able to really go in for an inclusive design or inclusive planning, or what we call as, because some people will be not satisfied, some people will, their interests will not be taken care of.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. So due to paucity of time, we'll just take one more question. Although we have many more in the chat box, we'll take one question from the question and answer. So this is by Muzaffar Ali. He's saying, first of all, thanks for very informative presentation, ma'am. If we focus on India-centric education system, it is mandatory for an educator to bring contemporary urban and rural infrastructure-based issues in the curriculum. So, what are the inclusive strategic framework and parametric indicators need to be implemented in studio pedagogy to achieve comprehensive sustainable development goals at grassroots level?
Okay. No, the policy is talking of India-centric approach, but the policy is talking of many other things. That is only a few lines of the policy. But if you read the policy in its totality, you will find that there are many other things the policy talks. That suppose the country is signatory, suppose our country is signatory to the Sendai framework, which is a disaster risk framework, which we have to apply in our country till 2030. So how do we do it? For example, SDG is one of them. SDG, if we have to apply SDG, then we have signed. So we have to, we are committed to that. So we have to, we have to integrate it in our planning. For example, when we say that we the one of the SDGs is about inclusivity. It's talking of inclusion. So how do we bring in people? How do we make this? For example, how do we make our areas or our neighborhoods accessible to people? Disabled people, there is no problem, there is no way of them for them to move. The mobility, accessibility of disabled or differently abled people, how would they? So how do we plan for them? So these sort of concepts need to be brought in our neighborhood planning. When we talk of as an architect, it's not, you are not designing only buildings, you are also designing you are also talking about neighborhoods, you are also seeing your surroundings. So how do we plan for them? How do we ensure that yes, this neighborhood is we have planned for universal accessibility in this neighborhood, or the walkability. Many places there are no footpaths. All these footpaths are encroached upon. So one has to one has to see that existing status. In the existing status, how do we go about it? There are concepts like complete streets in the neighborhood. Can we apply? How do we apply? What would be the challenges of applying the complete streets? We teach them, you know theory. Complete street is this, we are very good images, but then we have to teach them that in an Indian neighborhood, how do we really, in such a context, how do we implement a complete street? It is not about making good designs. It is also about what we have to learn is implementation.
Right.
And we have to see that if we have to implement, then who will implement, who are the people who would implement, then how would we implement? These sort of things are very necessary today. Implementation is the key. If we can, we can design, do, and good things, but if we don't teach them how to implement, then all this, when we say startups, when we say entrepreneurs, or when we say, okay, then new things will come up, innovative approach. Okay, let us see how we can, through innovations, we can bring it. Is it possible? So those sort of things are there.
I mean, last couple of days there were a lot of discussion related to how profession and academia are not connected. So I think you have kind of given a direction on how to connect academia and research, academia and practice, that is through research and implementation. I think that is the gap which, on the end of faculties, we are lacking, and we need to work more on these lines further.
Yes, implementation and challenges in the implementation. Like I was explaining local area plan, I was trying to tell you one example.
Right, right. Thank you so much, ma'am. So now I would like to virtually felicitate Dr. Sanjukta Bhaduri for taking so much time out of her busy schedule and being with us for this wonderful presentation. It was really helpful, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting.